Welcome, listeners, to www.IronRadio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening. Welcome, IronRadio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiology and sports nutrition professor of about, I think it's 17 years now, and a podcaster of 9 years. We've been doing this a long time, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
Hey, what's going on? It's Dr. Mike T. Nelson. I'm owner of Extreme Human Performance, LLC, do online training and coaching, do some online teaching, and faculty member at the Carrick Institute for Functional Neurology. I'm right now in Hood River, Oregon, which is beautiful. And if you hear a cat in the background, the place we're staying at, Bob the cat gets a little bit crazy once in a while. So,
you are like the Anthony Bourdain of science. Just everywhere.
Yeah.
And plus, I know you.
Yeah, it's beautiful out here.
You need to get back to food blogging some. Have you been doing that much lately?
You know, I did post a few more pictures since I've been out here, actually. Yeah,
I got to check.
Kind of slacking on that, so yeah.
Maybe I'm sort of a food nerd, but I think TC Loma calls that food porn. And it's funny. People you like to look at that stuff. You're like, hey, that looks healthy and delicious, or maybe just indulgent.
Yeah, we had the discussion at dinner last night. I was taking a picture of my food, and someone said, "Oh, have you been doing that for a while?" I said, "Yeah, since like 2001." It's like 2011. That's insane. I said, "No, 2001. Like back when you had to have like camera and film you had to develop and stuff." They're like, "What?"
Before it was cool or easy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And let's face it, powerlifters, bodybuilders, any kind of strength training people, they're going to be interested in food. So.
Oh yeah, especially when they travel, because to me that was like all part of the experience too.
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
Everything else.
All right, everyone. We have two listener mails. One is a follow-up and one is a new one. We have two little studies, and when we come back from break, we actually did a crossover podcast a little bit. We interviewed Sal and Adam from the MindPump podcast. We've had two emails in the past few months about those guys with different kinds of opinions, but they were fun to talk to, and so that's what we're going to talk about after the break. Dr. Nelson is going to lead us through a cool little discussion on sort of the state of the fitness industry in general, I think. So.
Yeah, that was a fun interview. I got to meet them briefly when I was at Paleo Effects the one time. So, yeah, I think the listeners, will enjoy it.
Okay. So this first question is for you. I sort of tabled it specifically for you, Mike, because Sebastian sent us a number of questions about all kinds of things, but one of them was about intermittent fasting, and I know this is an interest of yours, and you're pretty well read here. So
yeah,
he says, I currently fast 4 to 5 times per week for 12 to 16 hours. After everything that I heard about fasting, thanks to Rhonda Patrick, the benefits for health are numerous, like lowered inflammation, heart disease and cancer biomarker declines. It also helps to reduce my GERD symptoms, right? He's got acid reflux, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
From a being jacked perspective, what is your take on fasting and muscle gain?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I would start with that. I think there's a lot of benefits to intermittent fasting. I mean, I'm a big fan of it. I mean, I first used it, I was trying to think of the exact date the other time, 7-ish years ago, maybe longer than that now. I first heard about it from Brad Pilon, Eat Stop Eat. And I do like a lot of Rhonda Patrick stuff. She's got a lot of good stuff. They're very cool. Got to hang out with them many times. And if you're doing it 4 to 5 times per week for 12 to 16 hours, yeah, if you're really, really trying to maximize lean muscle or muscle accretion, it's probably not going to be the best, right? So here's the pro and the con, right? So the pro that I do like of fasting is that you're not eating anything, right? So my definition of intermittent fasting, and if you look in the literature, even the definition of what fasting is has been sort of bastardized.
Yeah.
But basically, intermittent fasting is a period of time where you're not eating anything that contains calories. So if he's doing 12 to 16 hours, 4 to 5 times per week, he has a period of those times when there's no calories coming in. So by definition, muscle protein synthesis, right, the process your body takes of those amino acids, those building blocks of protein, and stuffing them into muscle to make it bigger. We're looking just specifically at muscle here. That process during fasting, at best, is maybe neutral, probably slightly maybe catabolic. It's a big debate about where you kind of cross that line. Intermittent fasting itself is actually a catabolic process, which really scares a lot of people. But by the term catabolic, we're meaning that you're just tearing things down to produce energy. So if your goal is to get leaner, that's actually a good thing. If we look at studies that go up to maybe 24 hours in terms of how much muscle would you lose from a period of fasting, probably not that much. If you're weight training on that day, I would say you're probably going to be about neutral. So the bigger issue is that when you're doing more fasting, you are missing those times that you can increase muscle protein synthesis. So you can go back and listen to the podcast we did with Jorn Tromelin. He had some really, really cool stuff on that. You can geek out on that. The downside is that the whole muscle building process is extremely long, right? So I think if I remember right from the show, if you look at how much actually ends up per meal into muscle tissue at best, you're looking at around 20 grams-ish of actual protein that's accumulated in the muscle.
Yeah.
So it's pretty small. So I would say that if your goal is as much lean mass as possible, I usually will then limit fasting in those cases because I want to increase muscle protein synthesis as much as I can, as often as I can. The hard part is it's not a linear response, right? So if you go from no meals to one meal, that's a massive increase. 1 meal to 2 meal, better, not as much. Now you start getting in 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6. Yeah, now you're definitely kind of tapering off on that curve. So last point, if your goal is kind of a hybrid of I want to gain as much lean muscle mass as possible, I still want some of the health benefits of fasting, and I'm still a little bit worried about body composition. What I do with those clients is I will have them do one longer fasting period. They'll work up to 19 to 24 hours and only do that once per week. So their overnight fasting window may be anywhere from 8 to 10 hours or basically just while they're sleeping. What I like about that is, so if Monday is your fasting day, initially it'll be an off day from training. You get the lower insulin effects because you're not eating anything. That does push your body to use more fat, right? Because insulin is your fuel selector switch. When it's lower, you're pushing the body to use more fat. When it's higher, you're pushing the body to use more carbohydrates. So you kind of get the quote-unquote body composition, fat use effects from your fasting day. But then you have the other 6 days out of the week where you're really working to kind of maximize that muscle protein synthetic response. And that's kind of more of a template that I generally kind of follow myself. I have a much harder time, kind of gaining lean mass. So a lot of times I'll just do an overnight fast for, 10 to 12 hours and call it there. But if I'm working on body comp, then I'll start adding in that one longer fasting period per week.
Yeah, it does beg the question, some of what you just said about even meal frequency. I think it was, let me look here, episode 282, we had Dr. Bill Campbell on, and he was talking about, it was one of my favorite episodes, actually. I like to talk to Bill. Yeah, he's a great guy. And, he's sort of busting some myths about, in fact, a lot of people, I think, in the know, aren't saying what we used to in bodybuilding, that you need to eat 6 or 8 times a day. And in fact, the Mind Pump guys are going to talk about that after the break a little. I do think that smaller, more frequent meals can be helpful for some people, depending on their genetics and their behaviors, But at the same time, it is an interesting topic. The first thing I thought of when Seb asked that was, how much of this is sleeping, right? I'm going to presume that 12 to 16 hours includes an overnight of sleeping and maybe half of the next day or a portion of the next waking day, as opposed to sleeping for 12 hours and say, there, I fasted, So that's one of the first questions I have. And I think you agree with this, but I would certainly include, and Chris Shugart used to say this, sleep as part of those hours. I mean, if you're not going to eat.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you like to eat, sleep should be a portion of that intermittent fast, I guess. So,
yeah, and I definitely agree with that. And a side note, I've lost track of how many clients I've done this with now. Just literally not make any other changes. Take their sleep from 6 hours a night to just 8 hours. Again, adding 2 hours every night for some people's schedule is hard, but pretty much across the board in every single case, their body composition got better.
Yeah. Yep.
By literally, quote unquote, not doing anything. Right, not changing calories or anything else. And there's a whole bunch of mechanisms in the background from, if you're really stressed, you don't sleep enough, your body shifts to use more carbohydrates. There's a study showing that put people in a metabolic chamber, and you woke them up once every hour, they started shifting to use more carbohydrates. They shifted away from fat. People tend to eat more when they're under recovered and their sleep is messed up and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I've often
Plus, they're not up eating then.
Yeah. Yeah. The extremes, the hormonal drivers of the extremes do something similar to me, which I think is weird. You tend to shift toward carb metabolism if either A, there's a ton of epinephrine, adrenaline, noradrenaline around, driving glycolysis and, carbohydrate use. But then insulin, when it's constantly in the picture, also drives glycolysis. It sounds ironic, but it does. And in either case,
high levels.
Yeah, you're kind of shifting toward carbohydrate. Your body's, in a sense, biochemically forgetting how to burn fat. And I know that's one of your messages, I think. So, it's cool. It's a good question, and I think a lot of it's goal-oriented. And I like what you said about the idea is how much do you want to cash in on every opportunity to maximize muscle protein synthesis, And if your goal is body comp and some fat loss, I don't think you have to worry quite as much. One of the best things I would do is every Friday I would do sort of one of those pulse fasts that Chris Shugart sort of promoted, which is essentially just half a scoop of protein with a little bit of extra leucine in it and sip it like every 90 minutes or something like that. And I don't really consider that a meal because I was kind of fasting, but the idea would be to trickle in just a little bit of protein synthetic, leucine or accompanying amino acids and hold on to whatever muscle I could during what would otherwise be a fast. So there's even a spectrum. I like also what you said about define fast. Do you mean nothing? Do you mean, can you trickle in a little bit of amino acids here and there? Stuff like that. So it's a good question, and it's not an easy one. So thanks, Seb. That was good.
Yeah, and the last point I had on that, too, is I had a client who we couldn't figure anything out. I'm like, wow, why is she not losing any weight? Her performance is good. Everything else is looking good. And so I started asking more and more questions. And eventually I asked her about caffeine intake. And I said, well, how's your caffeine intake? She's like, oh, it's better. I only have about 6 cups of coffee a day. And I'm like, wow, that seems pretty high, a little better than where you were before. And I said, do you just drink coffee black? She's like, oh, no, I've been putting coconut oil in it. I'm like, oh. I said, well, how much coconut oil? And then she writes back, 1 tablespoon.
That's like 14 grams of fat.
Teaspoon, or did you mean tablespoon? She's like, no, 1 tablespoon in each cup of coffee. So I'm thinking, that's 6 extra tablespoons of coconut oil that I had completely not accounted for.
That's like 120 calories or more, yeah.
Yeah, for each. I was like, oh, well, I think we found her issue.
Yeah, that could add up. Even if it is mostly MCT or what have you, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. All right, we're going to keep moving along because this is going to be an extra long episode today, I think, because of having the Mind Pump guys on. This next one is from Rob. He sent us a nice long email. He says, Hi, thank you so much for the email. It really means a lot because we always, when people become supporting members, we personally send out something that says, thank you for supporting, the show, better internet, quality for fitness information, that sort of thing. And you're appreciated, right? So those emails, by the way, if you ever get one, they're real. That's really one of us sending you one. It's not a bot, Anyway, I've learned so much. Always look forward to the new podcast. I initially found your material on T Nation. Big fan of T Nation as well. I've been using Biotest products for years. He's actually a bodybuilder, competitive bodybuilder, Rob is. Your articles on fasted cardio and, protein intake, things like that, very helpful with my contest preps. Your data-driven approach really resonates with me. So good on you, Rob, for that right out of the gate, right? Evidence-based is one of the reasons we do this. So much of what you get on YouTube and in podcast, it's sort of loosely evidence-based, but I can tell you, Dr. Nelson and myself, and Phil too, although he maybe a little bit less on the academic side currently, it's evidence. We'll tell you where it was published, who said it. We cite sources. So, and you should expect more, right? Set your bar high for what you consider evidence, and Rob does apparently. So he says, I'm not a huge guy by nature, so I need every advantage I can get. IronRadio delivers every time. I'm sure you have a ton of material for the shows, but if possible, I won't read all this, but if possible, I'd like to throw a request in the ring. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the post-contest rebound, specifically the mythical window of opportunity to put on solid, lean mass. Some say post-contest is an ideal time to put on new muscle, as the body is severely depleted and ready to soak up everything you put in it, providing that training is properly maintained. Others say there is no evidence for this. As with many things in bodybuilding, anecdotal evidence plays a large role. Personally, I have done 4 contests over the span of 2 years. And each time after coming off a prep, I've been so motivated to finally be able to eat again and feel good in the gym. I've made significant gains in size and strength post-show. My reverse diets have been on point, not quite meticulous like the very controlled, contest diet, but I'm always right back in the gym. Monday after a show, I'm shocked at how quickly my strength improves and surpasses previous numbers, as well as the size gains. Each year I've been able to increase my maintenance calories, handle more carbs, improve body comp, that sort of thing. I'd love your thoughts. Well, let me tell you, as someone who has competed a number of times, I know what you're saying. My gut feeling is immediately, like in that Monday or the following week, a lot of bodybuilders actually look better than they do on stage, because they fill up their glycogen stores, right? Their muscles are brimming with carbohydrates. Their blood volume's up a little. They're more vascular. They're still really lean. And I can tell you, the last time I competed, I bitched about it a lot on the show, but I hurt myself, little nagging injuries. One of them I still have to this day. But they improve radically when you can actually start eating, and your sleep is better because you're not using sort of dietary stimulant type stuff, and even pre-workouts, coffee, whatever it is that you're leaning on so hard, because that last month before a contest is so not sustainable, and you're just strung out. So a lot of it, the immediate, is water balance and re-stuffing your muscles essentially with carbohydrates. I know that after a diet, and you're right about keeping tabs on a reverse diet, you don't just go nutso. Like this last time I competed, I had a good indication it was my last hurrah, so I ate quite a few blizzards. That's not the way. That's not the way to do it. You don't go to Dairy Queen for your refeed if you're serious about continuing to compete. However, I was injured. I was strung out more than ever before. I'm not sure a mid-40-year-old body likes that kind of thing like a 20 or 30-year-old body does. But in any case, when you watch that refeed, you do have to be careful because there are enzymes like LPL, lipoprotein lipase, right? It's an enzyme, and it becomes very active when you're in a very depressed calorie balance. And when you start to refeed, your body, through evolution, right, across the eons, has really become good at, hey, I better pack this shit away, frankly. So you do store, take up and store fat more readily because of enzymes like LPL, things like that. Whether or not there's something magical happening with protein synthesis, I would think that on some level, muscle tissue has a similar response to fat tissue. Maybe, I don't think I would call it mythical, and I think that's why Rob said it that way. Is it an advantage? Maybe. And maybe this even plays back to the intermittent fasting idea. I know there was a lot of ideas tossed around on the testosterone.com website years ago that intermittent fasting should be followed up with some big eating. Well, you got to be careful with that. By big eating, I think you really got to define it. You know, lots of extra protein maybe, or enough carbohydrates to refill your muscles. But boy, you'd have to be careful going hog wild, like with cheat meals and stuff like that. When you hear bodybuilders do that, if they're low carb all week long, they might eat literally a chocolate cake or a whole large pizza on the weekend, but then they're going to cycle back to essentially a semi-fasted state the following week, you know, because there's no way when you spread that pizza back across the last week, it's going to equal the number of calories you've withheld, you know, or carbohydrates. So, there may be something to it. I mean, the average person certainly isn't doing that. You know, they're not going to become 15 or 20 week depleted and then see what they can do to their muscle mass afterwards. It's too weird of a self-experiment, but bodybuilders will do it. So there may be something to it, but boy, I'd say be very cautious because you have a depressed metabolic state. You know, your BMR is lower. Your muscle mass is probably lower. Even somebody who knows how to diet, they lose muscle mass, at least some on a diet. And so you're in a very precarious state. A cautious refeed, though, with tons of protein and, a stepwise, just like you might progress downward in a 20-week diet, you might want to progress back upward. There may be something to the muscle regain. I haven't seen any evidence for that, like literally like research-based evidence. But I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I would generally agree. If you look, there's, I think, a couple studies now on case studies on natural bodybuilder competitors. And again, it's very few data points, but they do kind of indicate that the last few weeks to few months, body comp is generally really good, right? Because you're going to step on stage. But some interesting points about loss of lean body mass. And you talk to some competitors too, and you've mentioned this before, Lonnie, that, okay, how much muscle am I going to kind of give up at the end just to get a little bit leaner?
Yeah.
Right. And you're kind of walking that tightrope of, and a lot of the, at least for the natural side, people are judged on leanness because that's kind of the biggest thing you can see as a differential between one person versus the next, and you can get into judging and all that kind of stuff too. So maybe that lean body mass kind of pops back up, once you're done competing. So maybe you gain a couple more pounds pretty fast. I've just seen way too many people go the other extreme.
Yeah.
And,
yep.
4 weeks into it post contest, they're like, this is great. I've eaten, all these carbs. My lifts are up. Oh, life is wonderful. 8 weeks, they're like, I look like I've never dieted in my entire life.
Yes.
Why did I screw up the last 8 weeks of my life? And
it's amazing how much your whole physique turns to shit.
Yeah.
If you go whole hog, like you just go back to, I don't know,
Yep.
the occasional quarter pounder kind of thing. So.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of, reverse dieting, at least have some plan because, just a handful of competitors I've worked with, and they usually have some other metabolic or biomechanics or some other issues going on too. I'm a huge fan of using heart rate variability with them because there's a tendency, and I see this more in female competitors, that once you step off stage, your brain goes, okay, I made my goal, I'm done. All my stress is back to zero. I don't have to worry about anything. And then you show them this graph that says, yeah, your baseline stress level is, 15 off of where you're normally at. Basically saying just because you've completed your show, your body's stress has not just magically disappeared overnight.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of that is accumulated. And everybody kind of knows that, but it's, I think, super easy to forget that you've got this, state your body doesn't want to be in. And you've got this, in pretty much every case that I've done so far, this massive amount of accumulated stress that you need to also get back to baseline. And so for female competitors, I have a little rule that we don't even talk about you doing another show until I see that get back to baseline and maybe get even a little bit better. And then we'll discuss how long we want you to stay there, and then we can talk about potentially getting ready for another show.
Yeah, that's similar to what I do. When I work with especially female competitors, I haven't worked with a guy much in the past few years. I just don't have time. But, yeah, I mandate a 6-week refeed. Like, we're going to bring you back up out of this, because for some women, of course, they can become so lean they lose their period temporarily. And you can't just walk away from a client like that. That's amenorrheic like that. So you got to... You have if you walk the line between being a responsible healthcare professional and a contest prep person, because a lot of the contest gurus sure aren't going to do this, you want to bring the person back. And like you said, they're hormonally they're not in a necessarily good state. Their nervous system, like you said, high stress. They're probably hypothyroid or at least somehow disturbed thyroid function. There's so many things that are going on with that. So yeah. So I don't know. Honestly, Rob. If you could do that cleanly and you feel like you make gains and you don't just turn into a beanbag chair, great.
It sounds like it went really well for him. So it sounds like he knows approach what he's using by all indicators have been really good. So
yeah. Okay, I'm going to table this next one. I have an interesting study.
Strength and muscle sport news.
There's been a lot of stuff in the news lately about how cheese and maybe casein peptides are addictive. Interesting stuff. I'm not going to touch on this right now. I think it's a classic. I'm going to go on a rant, I'm sure, about how science journalists bastardize stuff. Oh God! And in fact, this article, which is by Bethany Brookshire in Science News, that's kind of what she's pointing a finger at. Is, oh my God! You guys misreported this. This is irresponsible journalism. So we'll talk about cheese or casein and whether or not it's addictive next week. I just wanted to finish with one thing before we go to break. I told Chris Shugart we would give a shout-out, and I think I did a little bit, on a compilation. I like these little compilations that they do. Mike, you and I obviously both contributed to this one. It's the best muscle-building breakfast. Fuel your workouts, make gains, and get ripped. This is just came out about a week ago. The overwhelming message when you leaf through this, and I mean, you've got people that I respect his opinions, culinary and metabolically, guys like Chris Shugart, T.C. Luoma, who is such a contrarian. He loves to shock people, but he's so smart. Anyway, and then you've got, the nerd contingent like me and Dr. Nelson here, and you got some pro bodybuilders. The overwhelming message is oats, berries, and some version of eggs and veggies for breakfast, which is funny because, so I just kind of summarized this entire piece for you, but if you want to go see nuances from each person, Chris Shugart, I think, has a lot of the same opinions that I do. It's hard to beat oatmeal with some protein in it in the morning. It's good to get your energy, carbohydrate stores and fuel to, work throughout the day. Your training will be better, a lot of things. People who eat breakfast instead of skipping it entirely, he's a big fan of that. I like what Chris does with the old-fashioned oats. He'll soak them overnight in water or almond milk. So just like he might soak beans instead of just cook them, he soaks them, and he puts 2 scoops of their metabolic drive, their protein. I believe that is a whey casein mix. You'd have to go look, everybody. And then he'll throw in a handful of nuts or berries. That's what I did this morning. A handful of nuts and berries with some. I just use straight whey protein. But soaking them overnight the night before is a neat idea. He said if you really don't like oatmeal, hot rice cereal can be good too. As I leaf through this, there's some pro bodybuilders consuming berries, eggs with spinach. Some people like whole eggs. Some people will say egg whites. I tend to do sort of a mix. I'll throw in a couple of whole eggs, but I like the taste of egg whites. Maybe it's all those years of of eating them. But TC says bacon and eggs with toast and a cup of Joe, and then he explains why. So and he's probably right. That's how people ate breakfast back in the 70s. And I can tell you, when I was a kid, people weren't that fat compared to now, and they had bacon and eggs and a cup of a piece of toast and some coffee. I like my whey and berry oatmeal. Mike, I think you said probably omelet and veggies or eggs and veggies.
Yep. Any
nuances there you want to share?
No, the only thing I threw in, because there's little background scene is that there's a word limit on it, and I didn't know how hard they were going to be on it, so I was like actually cutting everything down to like the word, and then realized that wasn't really that hard of a limit.
Right.
So yeah, I just had a thing where if you take garlic, you cut it up and leave it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. If you're looking for something that's antibacterial, antiviral, I'm unfortunately just getting over a little bit of a cold here. That actually works really good. And what happens is when you cut it, the compounds that have those properties have to be exposed to the oxygen. So the finer you cut it and leave it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes, you get a higher amount of those compounds. So I've even had people just, do that and then just sprinkle a little bit on their food at the end if they like garlic, or you can do the hardcore manly approach where you just eat it raw and then wash it down with a little bit of honey to kill the taste.
So if I remember right, you have to refresh me. Alliin and allicin, I think, are some of those compounds in garlic. Yeah.
That's right.
So, yeah, neat.
A couple of things that I haven't just discovered yet, but those are the main two.
Yeah, I eat a lot of garlic on food, actually. We get the diced stuff in a jar. I don't know if it'd be as good as the fresh. But yeah, cool. Nice little nugget.
And one last tip on the oatmeal, too, that I've done lately is you can buy like a rice cooker from Amazon. I got one that's all stainless steel. It's a smaller one, I think, for like $30. And you can put the old time, not the quick oats, but the steel cut, slow cut oats in there, and then just run it like a rice cooker, and it'll take 20 to 30 minutes. And the nice part I like about that is that it's just super easy. You just plug it in, turn it on, and then 20, 30 minutes later, you got your oatmeal.
Oh, yeah, sweet. I would think with rice, at least I've done this, you can pre-prep that stuff pretty well, where you just make a bunch of rice, and as long as you eat it within a couple of days, after you start pushing a week and it gets a little bit stale.
Funky.
Yeah. But all right, no, good stuff. All right, everybody, we are going to go to break. When we come back, Dr. Nelson's going to lead us through a chat with Sal and Adam from MindPump Radio. In this, what's becoming a megasode, sort of. Yeah. So we'll go to break. Hey, listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that. And I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book. But that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
Hey, we're back from break here. This is Dr. Mike C. Nelson. Got Lonnie here and also Phil. And we've got the guys from the MindPump podcast on for talking about the state of fitness this week and our topic of the day. So do you guys want to just briefly introduce yourself there?
Yeah, my name's Sal DiStefano. I've been professionally in the fitness industry for over 20 years, everything from personal trainer to a trainer of trainers, managing large box health clubs, owner of wellness facilities, an entrepreneur in fitness now for about 13 of those 20 years. And now I host a podcast, MindPump, which is a fitness/comedy podcast where we try to cover topics that we think resonate with the average person and help people move along the fitness journey and really try to uncover a lot of the myths that we find in mainstream fitness that you see all the time when you turn on your television or read a magazine or go on the internet.
And I'm Adam Schaefer, one of the other hosts of MindPump, and real similar to Sal. The only difference is he's a little bit older than I am, so he's got about 20 years. I got about 16 years in the industry, very similar path as him. He is a little more wellness and strength focused. I would say I'm more bodybuilding aesthetic focused. I'm also a men's physique pro, so I went through the whole IFBB circuit, and that's both of our backgrounds. We all got together, including Doug, our producer, and saw a lot of stuff that was going on in the fitness industry and felt that there's not a lot of good voices out there to express what's going on in the direction that we thought it needed to go. And I felt like it was going the wrong direction. So did Sal, so did Justin, so did Doug. And we said, you know what, why don't we get on a podcast and share all of our experience in this message?
Cool. So you guys had mentioned that you feel the fitness area is going in the wrong direction. Can you elaborate more on that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I really got into fitness personally as a kid. I was real young. I was about maybe 13 years old, and what motivated me to the weights were insecurities. I think a lot of people, especially a lot of men in particular, will get into lifting weights because we feel skinny or we want to improve or change something about ourselves, and so that's what I did. And it was driven by insecurities, and I, without realizing it, this is something I realized much later on, was how much of the fitness industry was geared around that. And so I tried every supplement you could think imaginable. I did every routine in every magazine that I found. And, through years and years of trial and error, I realized a lot of the information I was getting was false. A lot of the stuff I was reading, a lot of the supplements I was taking wasn't doing much for me in terms of my progress at all. I also, as I got older and, managed some of these big box gyms and had trainers working underneath me who then had clients, I realized that the mainstream fitness industry was not the answer. And what I mean by that is, in Western societies, and in particular in America, we have these health epidemics, chronic health epidemics, obesity and diabetes and autoimmune disease, and people just seem to be gaining more weight and getting less fit. And fitness really should be the answer to that. And instead, what ended up happening was this churn and burn effect. I'd manage these massive health clubs where we'd get thousands and thousands of workouts a day, and you're talking about dues bases in the $200,000 and $300,000 range every single month, and a lot of that was drop off and new enrollment, and the numbers were even more bleak when we would find out how often people would use the gym. And a paradigm shattering moment for me was when we sat down in a big meeting, me and I was among some of the top performing clubs in a very, very large corporate fitness organization. We sat down and we figured out that the average member would buy a membership, pay their monthly dues, and would really use the gym for about 3 months. And they'd keep their membership for something like 9 to 12 months. And then I realized the model was designed around that, because I'd see, oh, well, we have all these members, and gosh, if everybody showed up at the same time, there wouldn't be enough room in here.
You're screwed.
And I was like, something's not right here. Fast forward, I owned my own wellness facility, and I call it wellness because at the time I didn't realize it was a wellness facility. I was in the fitness side of it, but I did bring people in from other aspects of health, mainly because I wanted to offer this to my customers. It wasn't necessarily because I really understood those aspects, but I had somebody who did nutrition, but she was on the wellness side and would do food intolerance testing and was kind of on that, what I consider the woo-woo side. And then I had these massage therapists who would do things like meditation and would work with people's breathing patterns. And I didn't really, for me, it was like, okay, you guys do your thing, I'll do my thing, and it's cool because we're all under my roof. But as I worked with them, I realized that there's not only is there crossover, but and benefit from doing all these things, but they all should be combined in what people use the term wellness. I wish there was a better term now, because even wellness has been turned into a marketing term. But how it's all kind of one. And once I started understanding that, the results people got, the consistency I saw with members. I mean, we had clients that would come consistently for 12 years, and I never saw that in my big box gyms, or at least with that approach. And so when you look at mainstream fitness, you see it's either one or the other. You either have the fitness, the hardcore fitness, lose weight, build muscle, get ripped side, or you have the wellness, wear hemp T-shirts and sandals and eat granola but don't even ever touch a weight side. And I saw all of that, and I said, why can't we do all of that? And I think the average person could benefit from a little bit of all that. And you hear a lot of that in our podcast, in our MindPump podcast.
Well, the worst part about it is the people that are giving the advice. And this was something I had a very similar experience that Sal did, coming up through the largest fitness chain in the world, and got to grow through its heydays and experience the same thing and see that. And then when I had my experience getting into competing, I was even more fascinated by, these were the people that when we walk through a grocery store and you look at Shape Magazine, Men's Health, these are all my peers, all the other pro men's physique and bodybuilders and women's bikini athletes. And I remember getting involved in it and not knowing anything about it. I didn't grow up with this desire to compete one day. I did it for marketing reasons. I thought I wanted to get into marketing myself on social media and build an online business. And I thought, well, one of the best ways for me to get out there and do that is to attract attention through competing and make a name for myself within the circuit. And as I dove into it, I'll never forget the very first show, standing backstage and getting to know all the other competitors and athletes back there, and kind of talking to them about their diet and what their coach had put them on and how they were training. And I was just blown away by, I was standing next to what I would call the 1% of the 1%ers, right? So the elite physiques in the country, and these people had really no idea what they were doing. They were just doing what they were told by their coach, and a lot of that information, although they didn't look it, they looked amazing, the information that they were getting was awful. And then I thought, whoa, this is crazy. These are the guys and girls that everybody's looking up to. We're looking at them at magazines, or they got 1 million followers on Instagram, and these are the people that are sharing the advice and information. And it was unbelievable how bad it was. And that was at the amateur level. And then as I started to progress up, I thought, okay, well, maybe this is just because these guys and girls are, they're just amateurs. They're, the pros, they're going to be the smart ones. They're going to know how you're supposed to do this. And that's why they're pros. And I worked my way up to the professional level, and I found the same thing. And I thought, wow, this is a major problem, that the people that everybody's aspiring to be like really doesn't understand health and fitness. And just because they look good aesthetically doesn't mean they understand what's best for the body. And in fact, I found some of the worst eating disorders in the competitive world than I had ever seen in the thousands of clients that I had trained in my previous 15 years in the industry. And that just blew me away. So to me, I think that that was a lot of what inspired MindPump. Was when we got together and we started talking and sharing all this information, and I thought somebody's got to come out and talk about this, because I feel like it's a losing battle for the people out there that are giving good information, like your guys' self. I mean, it's hard to find these really, really smart doctors that are out there that are actually getting on to social media or podcasting. Most of them are in practices. They're behind the scenes. They're actually doing all the hard work, but they're not getting all the recognition because they don't have the prettiest face to put on a magazine, or they're not well known because they're attached to somebody. And we felt that was a major issue, and it became a goal of ours to make a name for ourselves, create ourselves as an authority in the industry, and then to introduce people to some of the brighter minds in fitness and share them.
You know, actually, one of the co-founders of IronRadio, Rob Fortney, he was an editor at Muscle Mag International for years and years, and he ghost wrote for these fitness and bodybuilding pros like you're talking about, right? And he would constantly bitch with me, you know, off air, of course, but oh my God, these guys they're just so ignorant. They have no idea what they're talking about. Holy Christ, you know. And so Rob would actually make them sound at least articulate, you know, and then if they said something completely bass-ackwards about how they dieted or something funky, he would kind of tweak it and make it sound a little more professional. But that's part of the reason for IronRadio too, right? Because Phil and myself and Rob, we all worked in magazines and online forums and, you know, writing fitness articles and that sort of thing. And you start to realize, yeah, the guys at the top and the gals at the top, holy God, you know, they're not really equipped, you know, to give advice. It's a lot of times it's it worked for me, so it'll work for you too kind of thing. And I think, of course, the elephant in the room is always, you know, I'm going to leave out the topics, you know, the like you said, the extreme diet, like the eating disorder type stuff, the drugs, maybe just the genetic aspect of it, you know. And so they're just beneficiaries of genes and drugs. And no, I don't want to take away from the discipline that these guys have, right, and that sort of thing. And I think the general public thinks anybody who, you know, looks good, oh, they just take steroids, you know, kind of thing. But at the same time, yeah, these guys were woefully inequipped to give advice. And we live in an era of the internet where it's not like the old days where Rob was at the magazine. You had an editor sort of filtering and professionalizing what these guys say. I mean, some of these competitors, Rob would show me what they actually submitted him. They can't even string together a complete sentence. And again, that sounds stereotypical. They're not all like that. But at the same time, you know, without editors, right, anybody can publish their own shit. So we end up with this free-for-all of misinformation on YouTube and podcasts and stuff because you don't have that editor gatekeeper.
Well, what blew me away, I remember one of the most mind-blowing events for me coming up in this in fitness was realizing, because what people need to understand is most of the information that we get through fitness, and even now, is pushed by those that kind of hold the loudspeaker, and the people that hold the loudspeaker are the ones that sell products like supplements or equipment. So a lot of the information that was promoted or pushed and that ended up becoming common knowledge, what we considered common knowledge, wasn't accurate information at all. Like when I discovered that, you know, eating every hour, every 2 hours wasn't really necessary, and I realized that, wait a minute, that sells more protein powders and bars, or that a lot of the fitness information we got on how to work out, you know, the Weider principles of fitness, those were designed to sell magazines. You know, Arthur Jones designed his training methodologies to sell Nautilus equipment. And it wasn't really it wasn't the best information. It was the best information to sell their products. And once I started uncovering that, it fucking blew me away. One of the most mind-blowing things that happened to me as a trainer, I'd have these clients who'd hire me and were really, really hardcore and be like, okay, Sal, I'll hire you. I'll do whatever you want. I'll train with you 5 days a week or whatever. And I'd have these, you know, men and women train with me, and I'd take them and I'd put them on a body part split because that's what I felt was the most effective type of training for everybody. And I remember switching them to just a basic, what I was taught was, like, this is the most basic way of training. And after about 5 months, you have to progress from this, a full body routine. And I'd get clients who'd been body part split training for years. I'd put them on a good old-fashioned full body type routine, and boom, 8 pounds of muscle in like a month, and it would blow me away. And I'd look at the old, articles in old bodybuilding magazines, and I'd found that these old timers used to train this way. And why is that more effective for everybody that I'm training? Is everybody's genetics just not just horrible, or is there something going on here? And then now, of course, you see science to show that for most people, that kind of frequency of training each body part tends to work better. And for most people, eating small meals throughout the day does absolutely nothing, may actually contribute to inflammation of the gut for some people. And just it just goes on and on, training to failure all the time. That was another mind-blowing thing for me was, gosh, if I take my clients to failure every single time we train, they start to regress. And if I stop a little bit short of failure, they start to progress and do better.
Well, and there's an epidemic right now. When you talk about that right there, I mean, if you follow social media trends and things right now, I mean, you can look under the hashtag beast mode, no days off.
Yep.
This is the
Yep.
This is the message.
Yep.
This is the message that's out there. Is it's not about. It's like everyone trying to become a martyr. It's who can train harder, who has more, who has more discipline. And I remember that standing backstage and talking to these guys. And like you said earlier, not to take anything from them and their discipline, because let me tell you, these guys have some discipline.
That's about all they have.
Because they're doing a lot of the shit the hard way. I'm listening to like tilapia and broccoli for 9 weeks is crazy. Like I don't know anybody that could do that, and it blows my mind that they had the coaches that were telling them that, and it turns into this who is willing to sacrifice more, push harder, and it's the wrong message. It doesn't have to be that way, and I think that's a lot about what we talk about on MindPump, because we just try to be, in fact, and we get made fun of a lot. They call us like Team No Sweat, because we're telling people like, listen, our bouts of cardio every single day and 1,300 calories is not the way to get yourself shredded, because even if you do, it's going to be short-lived, because nobody's going to live their life like that all the time.
Oh, your body starts to adapt in that direction. I remember having a female competitor, 130-pound female eating 260 grams of protein, doing 2 hours of cardio a day, and she was just flabbergasted when I told her, well, why don't you just cut an hour of cardio and bring your protein intake down to like 170? I know you like a lot of protein. And she was like, I'm going to lose all this muscle. I said, no. Just why don't you cut your protein and save that hour on the treadmill? And she was blown away by how her body responded. But I mean, the messages that we're getting, the information that we're getting is so inaccurate.
Well, it's geared by the supplement industry, like you said. When you talk about small meals, when you hear about the studies that come out with, because this is something else we talk about. We talk a lot about protein intake. We think it's, people, hold it up in this regard like it's the holy grail, that the more you take, the more muscle you're going to build. And that was the other. I would hear these bodybuilders or these men's physique athletes taking in 300, 400, some of them 600 grams of protein. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell why are you eating that much? And then you're turning around and you're like Sal was saying, getting on a treadmill for an hour or two. I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, why would you do that? Why would you stress the body on the cardio? So you're already sending a signal that, adding muscle or building muscle may not be the best thing. Then on top of that, you're over consuming protein. You're probably bloated half the time and stuffing yourself with that. Who knows how you're pooping after. I mean, it was just a crazy mess. And to see it at the elite level, right away, this light bulb went off like, okay, if these are what people think are our fitness leaders, the ones on covers of magazines, the ones that we're aspiring to be like, these cannot be the people that are delivering the message to the masses. Somebody's got to say something.
Well, and to say nothing of the idea that when they're on the cover of a magazine, it's such a temporary state of being. And I think the average person doesn't get that, right? I mean, not just the fake tan and all the other stuff, but I mean, they have done a target date 12 to 20 week diet. That's not how they always look. Right, but the average person looks at the cover of the magazine. They're like, "Holy shit, I want to look like that." That guy must look like that all the time. And I think when you compete, you really start to get this idea of how very temporary that look even is.
What's crazy is a lot of these guys and girls, what they do is they take all these photos, right around contest time, and then they drip them.
Oh yeah,
on
that's all they use
all year long, and it's like, they just feed right into that false perception that people already have of, oh, this guy looks like this or this girl looks like this year round. And it's like, no, he doesn't. Yeah. No, she doesn't. But they put it out there and I mean, it's going to the extreme. These people are renting Lamborghinis. They're having all these crazy photo shoots. I mean, they're putting on this image. I mean, social media has now become, commercials are dead. Marketing through TV and radio is dead. It's all going to be digital streaming media, and you see it happening already. We use a company, Shreds, as a great example of a company that didn't exist 10 years ago that exploded all through Instagram through putting out this. It's an image company, And when I went to my first Olympia about 5 years ago, I'll never forget calling the boys back at MindPump and going, you guys are not going to believe what I'm seeing right now. And they're like, what do you see? And I'm like, I just walked into Olympia and I'm looking over at Mr. Olympia standing behind a booth, and there's literally nobody wanting to talk to him. And there is a line out the door for this Instagram celebrity. This guy who doesn't have any certifications, no degree, no experience, but he looks buff, look cool, and he's attached to a company that's pumping a ton of marketing money behind him, and there is a line out the door to take pictures with this guy. This is how upside down this industry is.
It's manufactured authority. It's really not any different than when the magazines were, parroting these messages. It's just it's on steroids now, I guess. It's just a lot worse. It used to, and just a lot of the information that we're getting, it's so infuriating when I'd be in a gym and I'd see a, 17-year-old guy who's trying to build muscle, and he's doing, cable curls, wearing a weight belt and wearing a weight belt the whole workout, And then I'd talk to this kid and I'd be like, hey man, what are you doing with your workout today? And it was just this, conglomeration of cable machine exercises and machine exercises. And I'd ask him, well, when do you deadlift? And he's like, oh, no, I don't deadlift. I don't want my waist to get any bigger. And it used to, I mean, I would be so enraged that this was the information that we were getting. And then it got even worse. Then you see people wearing waist trainers. I don't know if you guys know what those are. There's the Squeam or the waist trainer.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Where people are purposely atrophying the muscles of their midsection. I mean, I thought we eliminated that in the 19th century with the corset. And you're seeing it.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
And you're seeing it in fitness of all places.
You're seeing men wear it.
Yeah.
My peers were wearing it. I never forget the first time some guy tried to hand it to me and tell me to do it. Like, you got to be kidding me. You got to be an idiot to do that. Yeah. And the only reason why you think it works and it drops an inch off sure it does, because it atrophies those muscles that wrap around your spine, which are kind of important. So I don't know why you would want to do that. No, it's bad, man. It was it's been a mess, and I feel like MindPump is slowly making a difference. I mean, it took us a good solid year or so before we started to gain some real traction and making a little bit of noise in the industry, and hopefully continuing to go that way and trying to introduce some of these great minds. That's the other thing too, is I would meet these fitness minds and PhDs and great, brilliant people that nobody knew who they were. Because they don't even own a social media, because they're 50 years old.
They're too busy learning.
Yeah, they spent most of their lives in labs and actually studying and progressing, and these guys, nobody knows who they are.
Right.
So it's a big important message of ours, is to get those type of people out there.
That's what we do as well. I mean, IronRadio is about that. We always have guests, and there's actually a surprising number of fascinating people. The egghead / meathead type, where they actually lift and they have something to say, or they have competitive experience. We've had all kinds of MDs and PhDs on the show over the years, but to your point about marketing, that's what we don't really do much. On our podcast, we have this niche corner of the internet where we every week for 9 years, very religious with what we do. But we probably get 30,000 downloads a month. And, people find us. We consider that good. And we kind of don't spend all day online. I know, Phil, you've talked about this before, but holy God, if you are really busting your ass running a gym, training people, or like me in an academic setting, if you're in a lab or a classroom, no, you can't spend all day. You got to think to yourself, how is it that they have such a monstrous internet presence And unfortunately, like you guys said, that's what people are lining up for. But I don't know. Hopefully over time you will see this breakout of an evidence-based message maybe with qualified people actually doing the podcast and YouTube and whatnot.
I think because of the ease of access with information, the internet's actually done this to a lot of industries, is you start to see transparency become king. And as more and more information gets presented, the good information or the accurate information starts to make headway. And here's the bottom line is, marketing that's one of the things we really try and do is we're trying to fight fire with fire. So, we have the entertainment piece, we have the marketing piece, or at least we're working on that. And it's like, okay, you guys can make a lot of noise, but so can we, except we're going to try and present information that's true and accurate. Now, in the short term, it's killed us. I got to be honest with you. Supplement companies wouldn't touch us with a 10-foot pole because here I am talking about how you don't need to eat 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and how most supplement companies put out bullshit, and excuse my language, and how when they do get tested, you find a lot of them are inaccurate labeling and this, that, and the other, and so they don't want to touch us. And so we had to figure out how are we going to make a living doing this when the companies that drive this industry don't like us, and we figured it out. It took us a while to kind of figure it out, but luckily nowadays you can do a podcast and present information on YouTube, and it doesn't cost much money. This wouldn't be possible. What we do and what you guys do wouldn't be possible 15 years ago.
Well, I think a big part of it is, too, I mean, we do it with our podcast, and then my facility, too, is I came to the realization I don't want to touch everybody. I want to touch the right people, and not touch them short term, like make a lasting change. Mm-hmm. Like basically I get a client and I usually have them forever. Right. And that's going to, in generations to come, the hope is that spreads on further. I can't change everybody. I just can't. So I need to change the few I can get the right way. And hopefully that then they go on, in the next generation, they help 5 people and, so on.
That's excellent.
I don't have the time to touch 50,000 people.
Well, I was going to say that's excellent because your people like you are the ones that are really making the real change, right? And we have a large segment of our audience, a very large segment of our audience are personal trainers or people who work with other people in fitness or in wellness. And, a big segment of our careers was training trainers. So it's funny because we talk about the misinformation that's out there, and a lot of that is being promoted by trainers who learned it from the industry. So you have a trainer, for example, I'll give you a simple example. When you become a personal trainer in a big box gym and a client hires you, one of the things that a lot of these trainers think they need to do is they need to hammer their client. Like, oh, this is your first workout. I'm going to make you really sore. And the client expects it and wants it. Like, oh, my God, I could barely move today. What a great workout. There isn't a proper assessment that's being done by most trainers. And the information that they're promoting to these clients is this kind of short-term hammer you, type of workouts, restrict calories. Okay, we want to lose 20 pounds. We want to do it in, 40 days. This is how it's going to work. And so you have even poor records with personal trainers and with the clients. So a lot of the information we present, we do communicate quite a bit to personal trainers. And that's where we're seeing a lot of we're seeing some good change there. If you're truly an effective personal trainer, I always use this on our show. I always tell trainers this. If clients call you and cancel their appointments because they're tired or because they kind of hurt in their knee or whatever, you're doing something wrong. You want to be the kind of trainer where your client calls you and says, hey, man, I'm not feeling that good today. My back kind of hurts. I'm kind of tired. What can you do in our workout? How can you help me with what we're doing today? That's when you start to notice that you're making a true and a good impact. And fortunately, I'm seeing more and more trainers. The caliber of personal trainers today, my God, just generally so much better than when I first became a trainer 20 years ago. Geez, when I was a trainer 20 years ago, the average personal trainer was scary. Today, you still see those scary trainers, but you're starting to see more and more who are understanding the correctional component of exercise, who are understanding exercise programming on a different level. who are understanding other modalities and how to implement other modalities to help their clients out. I'm seeing more trainers address stress with their clients, whereas before it was just adding more stress. So there are some positive trends that I think I'm starting to notice.
Well, there's layers to this also, and I think that, and we've tried to do this on the show where we start with kind of the basic, simple stuff like that, like these obvious things and we admit that as trainers, when we first started this, we did a lot of this stuff. I mean, I was taught and trained to train, and it was a culture within the gym. And, I tell people all the time, God, I wouldn't hire me 15 years ago, that's for sure. And so we share that, we openly discuss that. And then the next level to that is, okay, well, what about the stuff that I read that's a study? This study says that this is how it is, and, I read this here and I read this, and learning how to unpack that information. And we try and help disseminate that information that's being pressed out to everybody by helping them unpack the information and where that message is coming from and what they're trying to accomplish from that. Because that's the thing I get frustrated with too is, man, as I started to learn more, it became just as challenging now at that level because, man, now I can't just read a study. Now I got to figure out who paid for this study, where did it come from, what were the controls, because even a lot, I would say 50% of the studies that I would read were bad studies. So it's like, God, you can't even reach out to some of the brighter minds that are putting out studies out there because even some of those are biased. So there's definitely levels of this too, is helping people with the big rocks first, that's really how we built our foundation, is that when you talk about supplements and things like that, you're talking about very, very small differences in your overall performance, really learning about a balanced whole diet, learning how to train, the big compound movements that, God, I remember being a trainer 15 years ago, and there would be inches of dust on the squat rack. I didn't see a deadlift, I didn't think, until like 5-6 years into training. Like, unless you worked in one of those powerlifting gyms, if you just worked in it, or if you just went to your local LA Fitness, 24-hour fitness, basic Gold's gym, if you went to one of these basic gyms, people weren't even squatting and deadlifting and overhead pressing, some of the best staple movements that we all should be learning to do if we can't do now. So I think our message is really trying to help people teach the basics, and then once you kind of get that down, then learning how to unpack a lot of the information that's out there.
Yeah, as far as unpacking, one of the things that I was just going to share is it's also, you got to think about the idea that when you talk about the scientists, there's not just conflict of interest sometimes, but science is reductionist, right? The average person wants to hear, well, is that good or bad? They want to value judgments. Like, I don't have a piece of equipment in my lab that measures good, or bad. But I can tell you I saw an increase or decrease in muscle mass or in body weight or in the 1 repetition maximum, or you get the point. And I think the average person, they almost need to understand this, how stepwise science is. It's reductionist by nature. A hypothesis is a very narrow, very controlled kind of answer, small answer. And people they want to change their practice on one study, and that's not how it works. You have to wait for some sort of consensus, in the literature, or the judgment of someone who's going to be this filter, right? We're sort of information filters, whether you're a fitness podcaster or, nutrition, like you're talking about trainers being better. Nutrition is a subgenre, and it's licensed like healthcare. So we have to be careful drifting across different scopes of practice or into physical therapy, or, there's all this stuff. And I think the average person who wants to just pick up a barbell and become stronger, and a lot of our audience is either people who are beginning or advanced. And we talk about the differences between these things, right? We really focus on barbells and dumbbells and strength training, those dusty pieces of equipment that you were talking about. That is going away on some level. But yeah, there's a lot to think about, and people need that sort of information filter, to translate it into a usable gold nugget, I guess.
I think one thing we have to recognize, too, is the population as a whole. Everybody thinks they want to learn and get better. But a very smaller amount actually wants to put in the time.
Right.
Like, I mean, a good point of it is, like, I could post up a 10-second video of me doing a 700-pound squat that's meaningless, really, but it'll get 10,000 clicks. If I put up an article that is a 20-minute read but packed full of great information, it'll get 100 hits. Or, yeah, it's real. Or if we made a podcast that was purely entertainment value and no real information, we'd probably have 5 times the listeners.
Oh, I 100% believe that. That, what do you call it, Doug? Edumacation or whatever we call it. We try and entertain.
Entertainment education.
Because we knew that. We knew that if we came out with a podcast that was purely information, that we weren't going to grow beyond. We were going to get what we have. We have a lot, which I bet you guys do too, a lot of professional minds, but then we wouldn't attract the average person. And so, we try to find this kind of clever formula where we kind of entertain you a little bit, but then at the same time, too, there's always going to be these nuggets within the episode.
And here's the thing, like, if we really want to make an impact on overall fitness and health on a big level, it has to be a cultural shift. If you look at the societies that are the healthiest in the world, it's because it's a part of their culture, whether it's, waking up in the morning to do Tai Chi because this is what we've done for generations, or, fasting for this particular period of time because it's part of our religion, or these are the foods that we eat in these combinations or whatever because it's part of our culture to value the quality of our food. Food quality is part of their culture, where if you eat like fast food, they will boycott fast food because it's insulting to them, because how dare you make this garbage food? We value this quality. So it's kind of this accidental thing that you've seen for a long time. And I think in our country, we have to change the culture. And right now, the culture of fitness is cosmetic. How many people go to the gym and love the gym process? Do you know who loves doing that? Us, guys on the podcast right now. We're in an echo chamber talking to a bunch of people who love working out, who don't need to hear what we're talking about. How do we reach those other people who they go to the gym because they're motivated because they hate the way their body looks? Well, that doesn't last very long. We need to make the process, or help them enjoy the process.
Well, help them connect those dots, their relationship with exercise, their relationship with food, and their relationship with themselves. If we're going to change the culture, we have to help connect those dots.
And really, I remember, it was really effective for me presenting information in this way to a lot of my clients. I remember when I first learned that the role that the central nervous system played in adaptation and in fitness, and how you have a type A, highly stressed individual who's not getting much sleep. Probably the last thing you should do with them with their training is hammer the heck out of them. And I remember kind of learning that and presenting that to my clients, and how much better they felt when they would come to the gym sometimes and, hey, Sal, I've worked, 13 hours today and I only got 5 hours of sleep last night. And I'd say, okay, well, today's workout is going to consist of, yin yoga, very light resistance training movements where we're working on control and full range of motion. And then we're going to do some breathing exercises. And lo and behold, their bodies would respond. And not only that, but it wasn't this grind and struggle for them. They felt good the entire time, and really learning that and understanding that. And then you could see that it became a part of their culture, and how consistent they became with their routine as a result of that.
Cool. We just have a few minutes left here. Any other words you want to add to that?
Yeah,
I agree that I think that long term there has to be something where they enjoy the process and change their culture. And Lonnie probably knows the quote too, but I think it's something like, for someone to be considered a lifelong exerciser, I think they have to do it consistently for, I think it's 2 years, which at first you're like, 2 years, holy crap, that seems forever. But when you compare that to your entire life, it's not really that long.
It's nothing.
If you can kind of get people over that hump, then they kind of will always stick with it in some capacity.
Well, I'll give you a final, Jim, then I think that I try and stress to a lot of people is, and it goes right in line with what Sal was just saying right now. And what we see a huge rise right now are in the Soul Cycles, the Orange Theories, these small box, circuit train, high intensity type classes. And here's something that a lot of people don't realize. Those classes appeal to the people that need it the least. And it's funny how this works.
Sure.
We have this spectrum, right? And it seems that the people, and I say this all the time with like your like the real all natural hippie crunchy culture that meditate and are, those people could use a little 1 rep max and a little high intensity every once in a while in their life. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where you've got the, like Sal was saying, grind 6 days to 7 days a week at work, 12-hour days, high stress level job. And then that person is the person who loves those types of classes. And it's the worst thing that they could do for them. Their central nervous system is already fried. They're already stressing their body a ton. The last thing they need is this super loud stress signal in their workout routine. Those people could probably do some meditating, maybe some yoga, maybe some long rest periods in their training and full body type routines. So it's really funny that we tend to migrate to these things that we like the most. And I try and challenge people to really evaluate that and say, ask yourself, do you think that's really what's best for your body when you look at it yourself as a whole and the way you treat your body the rest of the week? And what we find is that's what happens is the really low intensity type personalities. Well, they're, the yoga or the hippie guy is doing the yoga when it's like, hey, listen, dude, you're pretty chill already. You're doing a great job of calming that CNS down. You probably could use a little bit of high intensity every once in a while. And the people that are going to these high intensity classes, like, man, you need to put a little bit of yoga into that life or have something that's a little less stressful on you because you're already stressing the shit out of yourself already. So I think learning to evaluate that and helping people connect that.
And really, lastly, an exercise program that is subpar, done consistently, is going to be more effective than the best workout designed ever that you don't do consistently.
Yep.
So,
Oh yeah.
That's what Phil says. That's like Phil's mantra, right?
yeah. So if if you're listening and you're not that motivated, and I used to work out or whatever, do a little something every single day. Frequency is really king when it comes to activity. It's more important than even intensity and volume. Do a little bit every day, and if you can do it consistently and you enjoy it, you're going to be way better off. And over time, you may find yourself getting
build
more
on
and more.
that. Build off of that.
That's it.
Awesome. And where can the people find out more about you?
You can find us on iTunes, and we have our biggest social media page is Instagram. Our page is at MindPump Media, and then we have personal pages, and then we have a YouTube channel where we post a brand new video every day on exercise or nutrition, or there's even some entertainment stuff on there. The YouTube channel is MindPump TV.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much for being on here. We greatly appreciate your time. I know we dragged you out of bed super early for the West Coast when we're recording this, and I'm out right now in Hood, Oregon, so I can I'm there with you on the time frame. But thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Awesome, guys.
Thanks, guys. Hey, listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store, one for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding,
please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.